Washington Historical Society on April the 16th, 1998, and Bob Cole is talking about stone walls in the area and showing information that he has found in the stone walls and the history of them.
You want me to point him up, or do you want to? He's got a very long speech. I've got his speech for him right here. And on that, here's Bob Cole. Thank you, Bob.
Before I start any of my talk on stuff of that nature, I think we're very fortunate in Millbrook to have the wealthy people in the Millbrook area, and also for the Italian people that brought the either building the stone walls in the Millbrook and also the houses around in the different areas of Millbrook. Of course, there's two types of stone walls: the dry stone walls and also the cement walls. Now, your cement walls pertaining to more unique in comparing and also in the dry walls. Comparing the stone walls, more or less, all depends on the diameter of your stones of your wall. Is either usually I build mine in the dry walls, and now it's 3 foot by 2 foot, but most of your walls are about like that. But in the stone walls and cement walls, if it goes 3 foot, you have to go at least either 4 or 5 foot down below ground so the frost stone heater. And then they build it up to the ground level and put a platform. And then on the stone walls, you get more of the stones that there are more in the Diedrichs and also over here by the tennis courts. That's done by safaris and stuff of that nature onto it. When you get through here, the picture of the men, which really from 15 to 20 people to work on a stone wall. Yeah, right. I'll leave them up here so anybody on this stone wall here. Now, mostly on your stone walls through here, my father told me, in Diedrichs and also on Bennett College and stuff of that nature, Diedrichs went around to different farmers. Now, this is all in stones. It's not as slate, so they didn't use too much slate. They did all stones, and that's why when they get through the Italians came through Millbrook on Diedrichs, and then they shuffled out throughout the areas of the Flagler estates and building stone walls from that area. It's more expensive to build more like a stone wall than it is a dry wall. Of course, they say you have to go down 4 or 5 feet for that area. Of course, in the olden days, they peck and shovel. Now they do all the backhoe and stuff of that nature. It's much easier. But usually they, and the stone wall, stuff of that nature onto it, they usually have about 4 or 5 men just cutting the stone. And when I first came to Millbrook, there was Mr. Danielle, and that was about in the 1940s. And he was a man around 5 foot, and he bent over quite a bit. And I asked Jimmy, I said, "What's the matter with your father? He has arthritis?" He said, "No, he was the man that faced the stone when the people up the stones to him to the stone wall, and he did it so much he couldn't straighten up." And that's just what he did all for his life, just cutting stones. Of course, now they have different methods in cutting stone, but they use the same principle with the sledgehammer. This is more of a stone with sharp edges of that nature. This is what I use for my dry walls of that nature. But on a stone wall, you don't use too much of your chisels, or this here is all either 8 or 10 or 20-pound hammer to cut the stones. Now they got stones with a hammer, some of that with a blunt end, and you cut it just like with a knife. I know when I first worked with Gus Ford, back in the 1940s, he was the Italian, one of the Italians in Millbrook, and he asked his son if he could get somebody to help him with mixing the cement. So, 'cause I was young and that, you know, and I didn't know what I was doing at that time. Mostly people wanted, work was hard at that time. So I helped build stone wall. Now that's across from Dutchess School on Clarn Road on the right-hand side where Mrs. DeGarris is now. So I helped them for about a good part of the summer building the stone wall. But it's hard to communicate with Mr. Gussport, which he didn't know any English. So for the first week I worked there, my father says, "How are you making out?" I said, "Well, I don't know, Dad." He said, "Now, you keep your eyes open, your mouth shut." He said, "You'll learn something." I said, "Yes, Dad." I said, so anyway, I'd help him through the summer and mix the cement, and then when he'd cut another stone and so of that nature, so I'd pick it up and put it into place. So then I would go look at his face, and I start his head to nod. So I finally got his confidence that I was doing the right thing, you know. But he wouldn't really show me how to cut stone. I mean, he kept it from him. But and I think if I was more of an Italian or some of that nature to carry his trade down to his Italians, I think I'd be better. But I didn't know anything about Italian or learn the Italian language, so I had to, you know, just be done with that. And plus I helped him, I say, just one summer, so of that nature onto it. And then compared to drying a stone wall, I said that doing a concrete wall of that nature is hard. I mean, you got to have 2 or 3 men or so of that nature onto it. Because the wall over there was originally a dry wall, and then they put cement on top of it, which more or less with your dry walls or your cement walls, the drainage is most the important thing. If you don't have the proper drainage or footings of your stone, you may as well not start it. So even in my wall, when in Latanzas where I'm working now, I usually dig about 4 or 5 inches to get the sod, and that's where your compression of. Once you get down to your hard ground and put the biggest base stones you can down at the bottom. So that is not good. When I started work with Gussport, it was around 40. Before then, in 1944, I had polio in 1944. And after that, then I learned help with Gus and Lone and Bone, and thinking about where it is now, it had been before, learning that the polio had saved my life to a certain extent. From then on, I worked for Millbrook Supply for 13 years. In the 60s and 70s, I worked to Care Arboretum for 13 years down there. And then I worked with Mr. Wetwood. And from then on, I've been doing more and more stone work, so I had to stop my regular job of just working stones and nothing else. In 1995, I had an accident pertaining to, I had a blood clot in my leg, and I went to the hospital, and it was in June, if I'm not mistaken, and they found the blood clot in my lower left leg where I had polio. And within 2 days, my foot started to turn black, and they say I have to amputate my leg. So then my leg was below the knee here, right in through here. So I asked the doctor, how come I went to my lower leg? Because this is the leg I had polio, which is a deterioration of the muscles, and that's the blood clot was here. And he said, now if this leg was strong as the other leg, the blood clot might not have gone down your leg, it went to your head. So there you go. Funny how things happen like that. So it's a good thing I had polio, he said, it went to the weakest part. So from then on. But when I worked at Care Arboretum, I did side jobs and stuff of that nature onto it, and got to the point that I was working days, nights, Saturdays, and Sundays. When you get 3 girls that go to college, you got to have some money. So I worked Saturdays and Sundays, so I didn't have any days off. But then I started, when my father was in the trucking business and farming and so that nature, we did a lot of landscaping. And then from what I learned from Gusport, I did start doing the dry stone walls. Now the dry stone wall is more or less with the slate, which is Dutchess County topsoil, they call it around here. so in the meantime, the farmers with the slate, they usually add either boundary lines, either fences or crops or stuff of that nature onto it. And they usually, in certain areas, they blast to get the stones and they put faces on them and stuff of that nature. Now these are all dry walls. A lot of times on the dry walls, they will give and take with the temperature and with the surroundings of the winters we have around here. Which in the stone walls, and the cement, so that nature, that's why you have to go down with 4 or 5 feet so it don't move. But as I said before, the either dry walls or the cement walls, the drainage most important. If you don't have the good drainage or the proper stones, it's going to heave and stuff of that nature. I have some pictures here. I don't know where that other picture that was back that Ernest Safaris. Now that's about now 1900s of that nature. But they crew about 20 people. So it's expensive in one way, but nothing to have a nice stone wall either on your premises or into your front. It really adds a lot of value and looks, and it'll be there for a long, long time. Now, what the stones that I have used is more or less retaining walls, repairing retaining walls. First one I've done the last 10, 15, 20 years was Mrs. George Whalen's on either side down on Burbank Road, on either side there. I did this nights and Saturdays and stuff of that nature. And then I did one down on Mrs. Stanley's down on Clarn Road. I was there about a year and a half filling stone walls, but the walls were already there, they're tumbling down, and you could go either joining property, their property, get stones to build them up and stuff of that nature onto it. I use cable and I use string and stuff of that nature onto it. And a lot of times stones don't, what they call faces on stones, so you have to get the hammer and make faces on the stones. So from then the Stanleys, then from then I went to Chestnut Ridge. I did Mr. Kirby's, which he's a lawyer in New York City. I did about two years work up there. I used about 450 pallets. The pallets would range about 2 tons a piece, and then they range about $180 to $200 per pellet. And before I had my accident, I used to work one pallet would last me about a day and a half, so that's about 1.5 tons stone lift a day. It's a lot of stone. So I was working there, and Mr. Kirby came up and he said, "You're not moving very fast." So I shook my head and I said, I'll fix you." So as that went by, I usually laid 8 to 10 feet a day. So every day I'd come, a stone I finished that night, I put an X. So at the end of 5 days, he came up Saturday, he said, "You still didn't move." I said, "Come here, Mr. Kirby, see these X's? How many you see?" He said, 5. I said, "Count how many feet I did." "Well, he said you did move along." I said, "Gee, thank you." So it never bothered me, but it's amazing. Stone walls, when you have, I think that was, I think it was 550 feet. So when you do a week's work of that nature, so you look at it perspective at a long time, you don't think you're moving fast enough, but when you move up there, you're moving a good many stones during the day. Then I went to Mr. Kirby. Then I Mr. Cardonian, which is the next house right on Chestnut Ridge. Bill installed stones up there just on Saturday, and about 2 years, this is regular field stones. And there was one place where I was getting field stones, was an old house, 40 by 40 with a chimney on both ends. And I took quite a few stones out, and there's one stone, slate, was about, I think it was 3 foot and about a foot and a half high, and I had to cut it in half. So I took my chisel and what they call a scouring it. I went down on one side, then I turned it over, and lo and below, here was the date of the house, 1745. And so I took it to him, and he was more or less impressed. And not only that, it was E.A., and the initial was his wife and his first initial on that stone. So amazing how things work, some of that nature onto it. But so he's got it in his fireplace now, some of that nature onto it. So then across the road, I worked for Miss Sandy Woods, was Mrs. Barney by the turkey farm. Worked there for 2 years. Then I worked from Lufkin, which is a Chestnut Ridge farm, just on the crest of the hill. I worked there for 2 years, then my accident happened, and then that stopped that. Then for the last five years, I've been working for Mr. Latanza. Now, he's the man from on Butts Hollow Road on 343 at the entrance of Roswell Millers. And I've been working there for 5 years. Now, I've done a lot of retaining walls that, with existing walls and some of that nature onto it, in the woods and some of that nature. Really, really beautiful. And what I've done now is I've done coming down to the road, which is right on Butts Hollow Road, which is about 15 feet from the roads, and I get 14 ton at a time from Massachusetts, Cummings, Massachusetts, and it's all shale, and it's beautiful stuff. This is more or less color of my hammer here, and it's light colors of that nature on. Really, this comes between 1.5 foot, 4 foot long, or 1.5 foot wide, so that nature onto it. But you cut it more or less with a chisel and so that nature, you do a very nice job onto it. And I've done it retaining walls and so that nature onto it. I've also worked for Mrs. Bradbury, which on Moore's Mills, Skidmore place. I worked there for a year, building stones that. And I also worked at Jake Maroney's around that place there, and I've also done other odd jobs that people require me to do. On the stone wall, it's really interesting because they say you never, two stone walls, you do the same. So it's very, very interesting. It's gratifying. Now, on some of the stones I've got here, which is one of the shells that I found. When you come up here later on, you can look at it through here. You come across different types of stones of that nature onto it. I know when I come to a nice stone, I thought it was nice, so I bring it home, so that nature onto it. So my wife says my dooryard looks more like a graveyard and does anything else. But one thing on the stones of that nature, you don't have to water them or do nothing. You just so that nature onto it. But then on the stone wall, you always wire and stuff of that nature. Then I've collected some of the wires, or some of the bob wires that I've collected through that area, some of that area. You never know. This time of year, it's nice to work, and then you get onto the summertime, especially when you're retaining walls in the fields of that nature. Snakes, you don't have to worry about snakes. You probably say, why? Well, if you work in one area, snakes always try to keep away from you because from that. But bees and stuff of that nature, you have to watch stuff of that nature. But usually either on your stones, either on the stone wall, the cement, you got the cement to hold the stones. But on the drywalls, you get chinking and stuff of that nature to hold them solid. And that's different. A lot of people don't like doing shale stuff of that nature. It takes more time. Of course, in cement wall, you just put the cement on there and place the stone. So that nature. But to each his own. But I love to do it, so that nature onto it. And of course, I used to work, I say, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. But since this accident, I only just work 8 hours or so that nature onto it. And the doctor said I should be doing that, not doing that. But here's some of the pictures that I wish you would come up and see some of that nature onto it. And that I've done in around the area. I've done some work in Pleasant Valley, some in Cold Springs. And this one man I did in Cold Springs, he called me up. The caretaker called me up and asked if I'd do a stone wall down there. So I went down and looked at it, and I told him I'd give him 2 days and a half to repair it. So I repaired it. About the second day he came and he said, "Now, do you know who you're building the stone wall for?" I said, "I have no idea." So he says, "Is the person that owns Arrow Shirt Company." So what a place. Oh, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Some of these places, the wealth and some of that nature is really beautiful down there. And there's more and more wealth in the last 10, 15 years, because you take in the 40s and 50s and 60s, we'll put it that way, an average person, I get usually, before I used to get $25 an hour, and I'm just getting $20 an hour. But you take the time, your stone, and $180 a day, or $200 a day, so that it runs you a lot of money. If you go out and buy the stones of that nature. If you got the stones, then you're all set. But then I have a pickup truck, I go get them and stuff of that nature onto it. But when I get now that the 14-ton at a time, it delivers right at the premises, so I don't have to move stuff of that nature onto it. So stone walls here, I usually have dumped half one load and half of the same, then spread out, so it's easier for you to get some of that nature onto it. But anytime somebody wants to come over, the Tanzas, anytime the sun is up, come on over. I'm glad to show you the stones that I'm building up here. It's very pretty.
What do you do? You do drywall then?
Yes, ma'am. All drywall. Pretty. Now, a lot of times now, you've seen a lot of your Mexicans, they're moving in, which they do nice jobs to a certain extent. They do not put capstones on the top of the stones. Why I put capstones on top of my stones is just like a house, the roof on your house. If you don't put something to not let the ice or snow down into it, the stone wall will not separate in the center. And they don't do it. They just put just loose stone on it. Then when the snow and ice gets onto it in the next couple of years, it's going to separate the shears off. A lot of times in your drywalls and stuff of that nature, it's equal pressure on both sides, which makes it nice. And I say, I usually dig down about 6 to 8 inches long. It's got good firm ground and good drainage. Your stones will last time. Now a lot of times in the fields, you can see a lot of times, usually the stone in more or less today's usually is chest high. Now you look around, it's belt high. They'll all settle the same. So that nature. Bound 200 years, I guess you take 3 foot, like 2 foot, it's a lot of weight on the bottom of the stone. So that's why you get the base stones as you and pound them heck right out of them. You know, have to talk to them once in a while. As long as they don't talk back on you, you're all set. But is there any questions? Yes.
The stone wall that in Cornell State where you're handing out 44.
Yes, ma'am.
That you put in the house. What's the history of that wall? Because that's something I haven't seen anywhere.
Well, now, I should tell you, the one on Dutchess School on 343, going down on the left-hand side was Mr. Van Allen. And I repaired that, I think, 2 years ago. And that's with the slate, and then with the, I better say this. But usually, it's a round stone. In the older days, used to call them niggerheads. You can't do anything with them, but you can't do that nowadays. But they cut them and put them in a single on either side, and what they call the sternum. There's one there, and also down the thorns. Now that's each mason has his own style, and that was his style of building the stone. So that was right to it. Yes?
The walls that the farmers built,
Yes?
when they were tearing the field,
Yes?
they never went underground. They just,
The cement wall?
no, drywall.
Well, they went down about a foot. That's what I say. Usually why you go down 1 foot, so when you put pressure on, the stone won't pull out in the bottom. And long as it's a firm foundations and the drainage, that's what you have about drainage. The drainage will lift that wall 4 or 5 inches high, just like that. But it will settle down. Now, a lot of times, you'll see one wall will fall down to a certain extent and one wall will. It all depends on which way it's facing. As to how the heck it's facing, which way that's got to do with it. Well, now, if you lay a stone wall here, the sun, in the winter time, when the frost comes out, the sun will take the frost out of this side and the frost out of this way, right? Now, if you do it north and south this side, the sun comes out this side, we'll take the frost out on this side and not on the other side. She'll raise to 2-3 inches. Finally, it will settle. But that's the way it is on different areas and stuff of that nature, on a dry wall, so that nature. A lot of times, these dry walls is more as their fall downs because of the tree roots or settling and stuff of that nature onto it. You have to point them up 4 or 5 years to settle off and stuff of that nature onto it. But once you get them, yes?
A lot of the farmland has stones that were actually impediments to plowing and so.
Yeah,
And they just stack them up. There's no, nobody I know that ever chops them up and fixed them like you.
Well, now, you see, I've done a lot on stones and some of that nature onto it. It's a little bit more fitting on stones and even on slate and some of that nature. It's fitting, and, some of that nature, and secured of each stone. That's the only thing to do. Now, on your slate wall, more or less, when I build my stone walls, the stones are overlapped. So of that nature. So when I put another stone on top, this other weight's down on top. You just can't. I don't give a dope on it. But now in your stone walls, that's why a lot of times you have big like that. That's why you have in between. And so of that nature, like the stone wall, you can do that because you got the cement to hold. Now your Mexicans of that nature, they cut them and they put stuff on the bottom to hold them, so of that nature. But ever so often when I, either in the stone wall, the slate walls of that nature, what I call an anchor. If the stone walls go through here, I'll get an anchor, goes from one end to the other. That's anchors the wall together. And the same way on top, get the biggest stones on top. When I have my loads come to me, I'll fit out the stones to put on the top even before I get to the top. So that nature. Now, on your slate and stuff of that nature, you can, it cuts pretty easy. It cuts pretty easy, but you got, cutting and facing and stuff of that nature. It takes time, just like, now a lot of times I'll go, if I have a stone that's one high and one below there, I can go stone and put that within ½ inch, and that stone will fit there. It's just knowing what stone to put in and stuff of that nature. And long as your stones are flat, instead of when you build a stone wall, when the wall like this here, as long as it's flat like that, not leaning out, you're all set. When it's leaning out, then the frost gets out, it'll slide just like a slide with it. Now on your dry walls, on your retaining walls, it's something different because you only got one face. But there's another, as I said before, when you put a retaining walls, Mr. Hasbrook over on Clinton Corners, I did quite a few over there. Now, the only thing on that, on the retaining walls, you always put gravel in back of the retaining walls. That's for your drainage of your water and stuff of that nature. In the retaining wall, you put your biggest stones on the bottom and your small, big stuff as you go along. You build like a dam. Now, this is your face stones, and the wall will be like this. Your big stones are here, and the small stones on like that. So build like a dam. Now, when the frost goes down the ground, when it heaves up, it'll heave up this way and come right on back. Now, if you had big stones on the top, it'll just push that stone right off. So that's why you have to worry about, as you said, the drainage is the most important thing. Put your big stones and fitting and stuff of that nature on. 4 or 5 stones and put them, and I lift it up from there. Now, where I work now, I have adjacent to a tractor, and some of the Mexicans, they have 10 men working on the place, so anytime I get in trouble or lift the stone, they'll help me lift the stone, so that's right to it. But usually, it all depends on stones, so that if you get too big of stones, you use, just like you do like climbing the ladder, climbing the stairs, excuse me. You lay one down, 2 down, and just flop it back up on top. If you get where you want it, then flop it back. Don't pick it up. It's lucky I've been, my back's been good, and I've stretched my back so much, I can put 2 books and stand on the books and still put my hands on the floor, which makes a big difference. Now, a lot of times you can't do that, and you lack about that much going to the floor, and that's where your back gets on. So that's why a lot of times I'll put 2 stones on the top and pick up from that. It makes a big difference. That just 4 or 5 inches makes a big difference when you lift the stone a long time. So that's
How many pairs of gloves do you wear out?
I don't. In the wintertime, I wear gloves, but in the summertime, I don't. It's just like an artist or any profession like that. You got to feel with your hands. If you don't feel with your hands, it's cumbersome, you know. You don't have to worry about your right hand. Your left hand, you have to worry about your thumbs and stuff of that nature onto it. But you pound good many hammers a day with this here and stuff of that nature onto it. Good many times during the day. I told my wife, I said, I don't remember when my father, before he passed away, the older people, you see all the wrinkles. And I said, geez, Dad, how do you get wrinkles? He said, you'll find out one day. And I look at my friend, he's freaking all wrinkles, you know, what the heck. But it gets to you after a while, so that is right to it. But I say, it's just like any other mason or any other professionist of that nature. If you like to do it, you're going to do good work. A lot of times on stone walls of that nature, once I get through one area of that nature, I'll sit back, stand back and look at it, see if I can improve on it. Can't improve on it. I know if I'm satisfied, the person I'm working for is satisfied. I never put out any pamphlets or advertise and stuff of that nature, just the word of mouth, where more or less I get my business of that nature. Yes?
You know much about the ancient history of stone walls. My father was always telling about itinerant stone wall layers that would come around, and they got 50 cents a day or something or another, but they were repairing walls at the time now. We're talking about, let's say, the 1880s, like that.
Yep.
And they were just coming around and repairing the walls.
Well, they had
built the walls? Were they slaves, or did the farmers actually do it?
Well, a lot of times I think around 1800 they had so many people coming over from Ireland and stuff of that nature.
Well, they came later.
Right, yeah, but then they started. The farmers start using their land instead of throwing them away. They had what they were going to do with it. So then they start putting for boundary lines and stuff of that nature into it. I know my father said, we lived on Valley Farm Road, he said each person was responsible for his road in front of his house. If it went down or sinkholes, you had to repair that road.
Yeah.
So that nature into it. And that's why your slate, a lot of time you get the people in the stone walls do not like to use slate. When it gets wet, it gets soft. When it's above ground, it gets hard. It just causes the moisture. That's why a lot of times the moisture, the slate on moisture will not pertaining to the stone, but the drywall will. I mean, it's that compared. It holds the moisture, and that's it. But it's easy to work.
Stone walls started to put.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Someplace to put some of these stones.
Yeah, right.
And then the junk stones, every farm had a stone pile.
Stone pile, yeah. But it's amazing when I worked with Cardinal, he's up to that foundation and some of them stone. How big is that piano? I don't know how big they got, I'm telling you. There's brute force and oxen and stone bolt and some of that nature. And it, just as square as anything. I said, I'd like to live back in those just to see how they did it, you know. But it's really amazing. No cement. I don't know. It's unbelievable. That there, that Cardonia I was speaking up there, it's on the side hill, and every about 4 or 5 feet there was stones, 5 feet about, I mean the alleyway was 5 feet this way and 20 feet long. I don't know what they did it must have been oxen or some of that nature where they store it, or I have no idea, right in the side of the hill. It's really pretty. All the stones, and that's where I got my stones, some of that nature. But some I can't use. I said, heck on that stuff. You can just, a lot of times in stone wall like that, you know what you can do and don't oversee it. Because if you do that, you're going to get hurt. It's just like anything else. But now they're using it in, not on the stone walls, and for your landscaping and some of that nature. I think it's very pretty. In different colors now on your, where you get the quarries and stuff, where this, I get my Cummings over there, it's a quarry. And they cut it out with blasting and some of that nature onto it. And then they cut it and bring it to me and some of that nature. But that's the same thing in the older days. Blasting and some of that nature, cutting it and some of that nature onto it. Now, I know my father said in Mattisville, all the stones from that area, they built the Bennett College. So that nature. So that's why a lot of your farms around here will not have the field stones, because Diedrich and all them went and paid money to get the stones. And that's why a lot of the stone walls around here are no more, because Diedrich had come in and used them for other purposes in Diedrich and so of that nature. Somebody went Diedrich, you want to go up there and place, you want some unbelievable.
In our neighborhood, all up and down what I call salt park, up and down.
Right.
Valley.
Yeah, right.
It was the highway that took all the stones.
Yeah, right.
Every farmer, his stone wall was deteriorating, and the highway department came along and said, you give us our stone wall, we'll put up a wire fence for you. Well, you know.
Yeah, they took the stones. Yeah, they took, but even in Tarrytown, through that area, some of the stones are beautiful. No, just all dry walls. And it's just beautiful. Even on Hyde Park, through that area, some of the estates there, all dry walls. All dry walls. It's really amazing. And of course, they say once you build a stone wall, it'll be there for a day. It'll be there for a day. It's too bad the stones couldn't talk to you and tell them who laid and some of that nature. So every time I laid a stone wall, I put my card on each stone. So some days somebody will say, well, gee, Bob Cole, who the heck is he? But that's what I do. It's very interesting. Yes?
The highway people also use the stones to make culverts.
That's right, yeah.
The drainage under the roads.
Yeah. Even in the railroads, and so I know where I live down at the old Millbrook Inn property, so that is where the railroad goes back mile. Some of those stones down there is just as perfect as everything. Some of the culverts, unbelievable. It's very, very pretty on the stones and some of that nature. Say they last there for. Yes, Martina.
Did you use a lot of the red stones as well as the ordinary?
No. Of course, you say there's so many types, and a lot of times the person I lay the stone walls, a lot of times they'll like a certain color and stuff of that nature to it, So you go by what they like and then you match it up and stuff of that nature. But there's a lot of slate with red over in Carrie Arbory. There's a lot of on the by the Troopers Barracks on that one side there. There's all red slate and stuff of that nature. They use them for fish tanks and stuff of that nature.
There in Davis Road.
That's right.
Davis Road.
And there was one, when I was working Carrie Arboretum, where Warner lives up on Canoe Hill there, and I was working there. There's one wall, maybe about 8 foot high, and just as straight as anything. So I examined the wall, and here the person who had laid the stone wall, for anchor the stone, they had focused posts. I don't know if you know, it's caught square, and they put it in the stone wall to anchor the wall from there. You know where it is, Jim?
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing how they did that, which is what they call anchor. And that's the way I do on my wall. Anchor. If you don't anchor, a lot of times you see on these driveways, you put these creosote posts or cement posts of that nature. 4 or 5 years, the posts go just like that. The only cause of that, because the drainage, a lot of times on stuff like that, you put a piece of pipe in it so the water and the pressure is back, gets out. And if that pressure gets on before it moves, it will bounce.
That's a high wall.
That's high wall. But I say with the drainage, that's what they have to do. A lot of times, some of your the walls you see here over on the Night Partners Lane, that wall is tilted like that, and that's just why undergrounding with a wood chuck or so of that nature, not putting the proper footings under so of that nature. But it tells in the end, you know, who's doing the job and stuff of that nature. Take your time and doing it just like you can do the same thing I do, but it takes a little more time. But once you do it, it's really relaxing when you get through and when it looks nice like that. But I say, anytime you want to come over to Butts Howell, please come and I'll be glad to show you what I mean.
You're working inside of the road.
You're right outside there. I've been there for 5 years, so. Yes?
Ever been inspired by stone walls you've seen in your travels?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's amazing. Now, this area here was slate and some of that nature. Then you go to Connecticut with the granite and some of that nature onto it, different changes and some of that nature. Now, Rollins, he gets more of his stones from Highlanders of that nature, more of a brownish stone and some of that nature onto it. They get from Highland and some of that nature. Of course, there's different slates and some of that nature onto it. But it's pretty when they all get together. It's really nice.
I helped friends with his stone wall,
Uh-huh.
and his palette of new stone came from Pennsylvania.
You're right, yeah.
Really good looking stone, but I live at Judy Stanley's house.
Yeah.
And the stone is very different that you built at her home than the stone that came in from Pennsylvania
Right, yeah.
on the palette.
Well, go ahead. That's why a lot of your states around here, they can go out, but they use the stones, what they got, limited on what their property. And that saves a lot of money without going buying it, so that nature onto it. And same with the farmer, they use my father always had a stone pile and some of that nature, use it for drainage or septic tanks or drainage or some of that nature. You always use stones one way or the other. But then that's why a lot of your stone walls around Millbrook, either the people come and take them, some of that nature on it, or they buy them one way or the other. A lot of times on Thorns you see a lot of level stones, and all of a sudden you don't see any stones. Some people that just help themselves. It's a shame, but what are you going to do? It ruins a stone wall, you know, so that nature. Yes?
Now, you mentioned before about the stone walls that have like the round stones.
Yes, ma'am.
And they're usually white, the round stones
White
usually white.
quartz or some of that nature.
Okay.
You cut them in some of that nature, stones and some of that
And
nature.
that was just a particular mason's way of doing
Yeah, right,
it?
yeah. In any stone walls of that nature onto it, each stone has its seams, some of that nature, the same on a stone wall. You got to fork it over some of that nature onto it. And a lot of times on the stone walls that I built, some of that nature, you pick it up 7 times. So when you get putting on the stone wall, you all know where it goes, but you don't. But that's the way it is. But you usually pick it up around 7 times.
Each stone?
But that's why nice where I am now, it delivers, then you don't have to pick it up. So
Do you know what date those stone walls that my friend asked about, he just asked about, the round ones in the center?
Yeah.
What usually go back to?
Well, got to be, Thorns, I think, where's Carmine? Carmine, what time did Thorns come to Millbrook? Put your thinking cap. Around 1850s, 1840s, something like that, I think they came. They've been here a long time.
250 years.
Huh?
I thought 250 years.
Yeah, it's a long time, yeah.
You were just a boy then, weren't you?
I don't even know that higher right there, but then, you know. Yeah, right, Well, I say this house up on Chester Ridge, so that was 1745, and those I know it was before then. I think there's another house down the close. My grandfather lived down in Emil House, and that was the same era of that nature onto it, but they used cement and of that nature onto it. But of course, they say stone wall goes way, way back. I mean, it's amazing. Even Ireland and even in China and back Christ, I guess, they still use stone walls for that nature onto it. But it's amazing how they did it and what we do nowadays. That's why you don't see too much stone walls of that nature on in cement. It's quite expensive. I think Safari, if I say, when they had work up there, I think it was 50 cents a day. That was sun up and sun out. So it's amazing, you know. They had 50 cents an hour, and somebody laughed at you right now for 50 cents a day. But you know, I know Gus Fort, when I worked for him, he always had Italian bread hollowed out with peppers and onions, and then they had we drink with a bottle of wine, and then he asked to buy one, and I said no, I did not get that. You wouldn't have me help you. But that's what they had in the olden days, like that, and their hands were calluses. It's unbelievable. But the older people, especially in cement and stuff of that nature, it's hard on your hands. It's hard on your hands. But
have you had any serious apprentices of your own? You mentioned people who were
before I had my accident, I was going to have 4 or 5 people of that nature. Then one of my accountant, he said, with all the insurance and stuff of that nature, they don't pay. They just don't pay. A lot of times that's why I do on dry walls, which I don't need any backhoe or bulldozers or dump trucks or mixing cement and stuff of that nature. I do it all myself. So it's that less expense that you have to do it. So that's why I went to the dry walls and cement and stuff of that nature. It's more expensive of that nature. Then I had one kid working for me, and I had if it rains, and I had to go get him, and he didn't show up, and you got to go him, and I said, the hell with that. And I said, I'll work by myself. It's a shame because it's a lost art. It's too bad. It's too bad the Italian people in the old Augusta didn't show their children how to do it. It's really a shame. They didn't pass it on. I don't know if I got any Italian or what, who knows, but it's really a shame. It's a lost art. You know, too many people in it. I know on the towns, those Cardones of that nature, they get more or less masons from Connecticut and stuff of that nature. Most of your Italians will like brick and cement and brick and cement and stuff of that nature, but they won't try to do it right away. It's too bad, you know, because they do beautiful work. I mean, like on Deidre's place and all over there, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Yes?
I know you mentioned about a lot of the stone being collected from the area farms and taken to Dietrich's.
Yes.
But in your experience, have you found a lot of just linear stone piles around in the woods?
No, they usually use them right on up, so that makes sense. A lot of times there's some stone here with a cloth and stuff of that nature onto it. When you come up there, well, I have quite a few home, but I just brought this one here just to show you and stuff of that nature. It's really pretty. Sometimes you come across, you look and stuff of that nature. A lot of times you look and you put it in the stone wall. I said, you think I should save it? But you know, you can't save every stuff.
Where did that come from?
The Chester Ridge.
You know, about every summer for a few years, one of my jobs was to pick the stones that grew every year out of the ground. And we had a sled, and I was flat, and I would put the stones on the sled. And, you know, tractor go on, I pick them up, and every year, same spot, there were new stones.
Well, you see, a lot of times in the stones and stuff of that nature, a lot of people say, well, they grow. They don't grow. It's just like you uncover a stone, okay? In the summertime, plow and stuff of that nature onto it. Then the fall comes, and the moisture goes down under the stone. Okay? Then the frost comes over, will eat the stone. And they keep doing that year after year, and the stone grows. And that's how you think they grow, but they really grow. And that's how they, once they get moisture down there, I say the frost will leave 3 to 4 inches from the stem. Everything fertilized, all right. But that's why they always did say a lot of these farmers, 100 years old, there's still stones come up popping up in the field. So that's why they just keep growing high. A lot of times I know my father says usually on the big stones and some of that nature, how they get rid of big stones, either in winter time, so of that nature they put heaping wood and some of that nature and get the stone hot. And then they put water on it. And that cracks your stone. That's the same way Indians make their arrowheads. They get it hot, they just put a drop of water where they want the curve, and that thing can chip just like anything else. That's how they make the Indian arrows. But usually on the stone wall and some of that nature, when I build a stone wall, you usually can tell the stone has been on fire, so that nature is very brittle. Very brittle. Once you hit it with a hammer, it just falls all apart. So that nature. So you know it had been in the field, that farmer had heated and then put water on, so that nature. A lot of times on these roads and that, you get crevices, you just put water on it, or that split in no time, so that nature. That's how they did it, so that nature.
Well, thank you very much. Pictures are going around. When you finish, please bring them up back up to us. The big ones.
Yeah, that big. There's a lot of pictures in there. You see more or less duplicates. You put them together, and that's a continuation of the stone wall. Now, on some of these stone walls, on the one is safaris of that nature, there's 2 types of building stone walls on the side hill or going down on the slope. You can use it as a step or go along as a terrain of that nature. There's one stone wall over there. It's the natural terrain, and that's why you go by. It's really beautiful. It really sets off the whole thing like that. But on this stone walls of that nature, with the cements of that nature, you never have to repair it of that nature. Until the frost gets it and keep it, then you have to think about doing something with that nature.
I want to talk about a little bit here. There's a couple of answers. One is there's some of the chairs that people have helped volunteers to move into that room and put them on the table and come back into this room. The rest of them will put up here, so they're going to help people help with the chairs. And the other is to anybody who's not a member who would like to see the mailing, see Harold, and he'll put you on the mailing list, and we'll be able to know what's coming up.
Now we're building stone walls, some of that nature. Once you start building a stone wall, it's hard not to stop. I know Bill Hammond, he does concrete, some of that nature. But once you stop, it gets that just like going fishing. You don't catch any fish, but then once you catch one fish, then that turns you on to some of that nature.
Wow. Thank you so much.